Step 7 is all about how we manage your project risk. Now, every project in the entire world has a ton of risks. Yes, including yours. You got threats. Those are the things that can negatively impact your project, and you got opportunities. Those are the things that could positively impact your project. Now, your big challenge is how do you prepare for something that might happen? Well, let's talk about it. In the risk management knowledge area, there's 3 little chunks that are going to help us out a lot. Number 1 is all about how we find, prioritize, and strategize risk response plans to attack those big, meaty risks and opportunities that we determine are at the top of our project. Now, step number 2 is how we execute and boom, shoot those risk responses at the perfect possible time. Now, the 3rd step is how we evaluate the success of those risk responses. And our mantra is always plan versus actual, and how we adjust and tweak the strategies as needed, and how do we uncover new risk as we go deeper and deeper into our project. Now, as we move forward, we're going to talk about step 1. Let's dive in. In planning risks, there are 5 little processes. That top one, plan risk management, the way we summarize that is that's our overall approach for how we're going to manage risks. It's like, who's responsible for risks? Where do we write them down? How often do we meet? All those details that talk about how we're going to manage risks from the beginning to the end. Now, the other 4 processes, these are 4 logical steps that help you uncover your risks, evaluate and prioritize them, and nail down those focused risk response plans to attack the big, meaty risks and opportunities. Now, I think about these 4 steps as a funnel, big at the top, little at the bottom, really going to help you out. Now, this is the way it works. All the risk goes into the top. First process is called identify risk. Who would have thunk it? And as we go through there, 2 different types of analysis that we'll walk through help us discern what are the most important risks. And at the bottom, we have planned risk responses, where we generate clearly defined risk responses that attack those big, important, meaty risks and opportunities. Now, your goal through this entire funnel is what we call project resilience. Like this ship, yes, the ocean has all kinds of waves, all kinds of storms, all kinds of things that are hitting us on our project, but we have planned, and now our project has a lot of resilience. We can live through the storm. That's what we're trying to do with risk. Now, step number 1, top of the funnel, is to dive deep into our project and uncover and document our risks. That's what we're doing. Now, where do we find risks? There's a lot of different places to look. If we think about where we are, we're in planning, got those processes in risk. Look at all the other things that we've either done or are doing, right? We've developed a charter. We're developing our baseline. We're talking about quality, about people, about communications, about stakeholders. Man, every single one of those conversations, every one of those processes, we can just squeeze risks and opportunities out of it. They're raining on us. All we need to do is get a bucket to catch them, right? Now, our bucket for risk is called the risk register, okay? And we're going to write them all down. Now, the categories that we might go through is we might identify where we found it. Where in the WBS does this relate to? Or what conversation were we having, boom, that popped up this risk? What is it related to, the category? What's the description? We'll talk all about how we prioritize using probability and impact. We have an overall risk score that takes both things into account. We have trigger conditions. That's when do you know that the risk is, boom, arrived. And then we have the risk response plans. Those are the arrows that we shoot at the risk at the right time. The risk owner, who's keeping their eyes out and managing the risk. And then what's the status and the result? Once we do that, we got risks going in the right direction. So right now, we just fill up our both risks and opportunities, okay? Now, let's play out an example. Say we're filling out the WBS and we're like, oh, at this step 1.5, we see some problems related to material. A risk has emerged. It is during the project's execution phase, there's a risk that the price of steel could rise dramatically, which would have a negative impact on our ability to meet the cost baseline. Think about that. Really specific about where it is, what it's related to. So in execution, we have a material. If the cost goes up, it could really hurt our baseline. Really specific. Now we're going to get that and we're going to go on and keep nailing down more and more risks to fill up that register. That's beautiful. So now that we have a full register, which we continue to fill up through the length of the project, what do we do? The next step is to go and do some analysis. Our first type of analysis is to prioritize our risk by dividing the probability and the impact. Here we go. So for each individual risk, you are going to ask, what is the probability that it happens? And what's the impact? How high does it hurt if it actually arrives? So we're going to give ourselves, for each risk, a 1 through 5 score. Let me show you how it works. Now, the probability times the impact gives us a risk score. For every individual risk, we're going to get a risk score. Here's how it plays out. Now, for our material cost rising risk, we got to get people together and we said, how likely is this? We talked to the economists. We talked to the people that have been around for a while that know the steel game, whatever that is. And they said the probability of this happening is like a 3 out of 5. So we wrote it down. We said, if it does happen, how bad is it? And they go, woo boy, it is a 5 out of 5. So what we do is we multiply that 3 times the 5 and we get 15. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right, so that's a 15 ranked risk right there. Now we go to the next risk that we find later. The probability is 1, the impact's 3. We can do that math. It's only a 3-ster, okay? And the last one, it's related to quality. We got a probability of 4, an impact of 2, and therefore the risk score is 8. Now, the question that I would ask you is, how do we rank these things? Now, it's pretty obvious that the big one at the top, but imagine we had 189 risks. How would we easily rank them? Well, we're going to do it by the risk score, okay? So we're going to rank it by the largest risk score to the bottom. Here we go. Zoop. There it goes, 15, 8, 3. And if you think about 185, whatever left of them, they would all in the Excel file rank. So we got an ordered list. Beautiful. Of all the risk from the meatiest, worst, craziest risk to the ones that we don't need to worry about. Now that's great. Now with all the risk ranked on the register, you can also visualize the priority using another little visual tool. It's called the probability and impact matrix. Now, the way to think about this is kind of like a book, all right? Now in the middle, there's a spine. On one side, we put all our risks, the bad things, the threats, all right? On the other side, all the opportunities, the good stuff, all right? Now, the way it works is we rank the probabilities. Remember those scores? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the negative or positive impacts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And here's how it would work for our first little material risk. We had a probability of 3 and an impact of 5. Where do we put it on the chart? Right there. Probability 3, impact 5. Bloop, throw a little dot right there. As we go down, these are negative things. We didn't have any good things that I came up with. We have a 4 and a 2, so we put that little dot there. And lastly, 1 and 3. Now, as we fill this out, it's going to look like your probability and impacts matrix gets the chicken pox, okay? Got stuff on the bad side and the good side, but in reality, it's going to show you the dispersion, if you will, of all the risks. And that first little dark gray section, those are the priority risks and opportunity. The lighter gray is like as we move out, those are the second level ones. And the one on the outside, those are the ones that maybe we plan for, but probably not, all right? Not the priority there. Now that we have all our risks ranked through qualitative risk analysis, what we do next is we jump into quantitative. We get deep in the numbers, all right? To understand the project's risk profile, we want to understand the total impact of all those little risks together. Let's talk about how it works. There's 2 key methods that we use. One is called sensitivity analysis, and the other one is called Monte Carlo analysis. Let's jump into sensitivity. Sensitivity analysis, it really asks which risks have the biggest impact. So it kind of looks like this. Here's a good example. As we see on that left side, those are all the risks and opportunities there. On the bottom, it's that how each risk is correlated to an output. In this one, it's talking about duration or schedule. Like if a risk happen, what happens to the schedule? Good or bad, okay? Let's play an example out. That one at the top, it's like if that happens, that long list right there, that long bar says, whoa, the schedule goes really longer. Cool. Now, the other one that we drop down, the third one, we say if that happens, hey, the schedule goes shorter. It's on that side. So it just says, how does it rank on the list? This one has a positive, the other one has a negative impact, and how much, okay? How correlated it is to the output. Now, The other thing that we do is we understand that sensitivity analysis is also called the tornado diagram. Anybody want to guess why? Because it kind of looks like a tornado with those things right there. So just another name that you can attach to it. All right. Now, Monte Carlo, if we want to understand the big picture for ginormous projects, we use Monte Carlo. And when I think about Monte Carlo, I think about fancy cars, James Bond, and gambling. And it's kind of like that. The Monte Carlo simulation helps you understand the range of uncertainty in your project due to risks. So let's see what that means. Now, you defined a lot of risks out there. Some were big, some were small. What would happen to your project results? Let's just play the example out. If all the bad risks happen, like, oh my gosh, Murphy's Law showed up and didn't want to leave, everything bad happened, what would happen to your project? Or if you just happen to get the luckiest day and week and month and year of all, that none of the bad stuff happened, what would happen to your project? Or if a smattering of this, that, and the other thing, what would happen? Obviously, you'd have a different output for each one of those occurrences. Let's see what the math tells us. All right, Monte Carlos gives us a mathematical understanding of the differences that we can expect based on all the risks. Let's see what it looks like. So we're talking about a range of uncertainty, meaning if everything bad happens or nothing or somewhere in the middle. A lot of times it'll end up looking like this. And this data that you collect on the risk register, all those details goes into a computer model, and bloop, 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 it pops out here. Here's how it works. It talks about the total projected outcome, what the cost could be. And it says, what if all the bad things happen? And the computer does all the things. What if all the bad things happen? Bing, 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 boop, bop, boop. And it says, bang, this is what the cost would be. And it says, well, what if nothing happened? That would be. And what if some happened? That was what it'd be. So it says all these different occurrences along that curve. That's what the dispersion is. And what we think about is that the difference between the low and the high is the range of uncertainty. If nothing bad happens or if everything bad happens, this is the options, okay? Now, that's the lowest, that's the highest, that's the range of uncertainty. Now, this is normally used just in big, ginormous projects. So if you have a middle or a small project, you're probably not going to have enough data and enough variation to really make this a useful thing. But if you're in a big construction project, that kind of stuff, whoo, baby, this could be a great thing for you to use. All right? So now that we appreciate our project's risk profile, what it looks like, a lot more depth, what do? Now we jump into developing risk response plans. Now, these are laser-focused strategies to appropriately handle our most important risks. Now, let's go back to that register that we were developing, okay? We had that one at the top, the most important risk in our little register there. Now we got to develop what strategy would work for here. So, did you know that there are different strategies? In fact, there are 5 different normal type strategies that you could use for risk. Let me explain them. To help you learn these strategies, we're going to play a little game, all right? Now, imagine you're the captain of a passenger ship and you're planning a voyage from England to New York. Now, you, my friend, are worried about the risk of icebergs. You saw the Titanic. You don't want a Titanic 2. You don't want to hit those icebergs. What risk response strategies could you use? Let's walk it through. Now, risk response strategy number 1 could be you just accept the risk. Hey, like Jenga over there, yeah, it could fall over, but no big deal. You acknowledge the existence of a risk, but are taking no preventative action. The key word is no action. So accepting the risk says, I'm just going to let it play out. I'm not going to do anything. Let's see what it looks like in the iceberg example. If we accept it, you as the captain would be saying, yes, there are icebergs out there, but don't worry. We don't need to do anything to prepare. I'm feeling lucky. We're going to be fine. Full steam ahead. Now, the second strategy is called avoid. Now, avoid is to take action. Take action to eliminate the threat or protect the project from its impact, all right? The key word here is eliminate, all right? We're trying to eliminate by taking action. So in the iceberg example, instead of taking a route that is known to have icebergs, if we wanted to avoid it, what would we do? Well, we'd probably go south, okay? Probably the opposite way against all the winds and the currents, but we'd have no icebergs, all right? Now, you remove the risk of icebergs, but as we do that, we got to consider the cost impact. Going to be a lot more fuel, probably, and the schedule impact is going to be longer, but you might make it, so that's a good thing, all to consider. Now, the third strategy is called mitigate. And the big thing here is it says to reduce the probability and or the impact of the risk. Keyword, reduce, all right? Iceberg for mitigate. When you get close to known iceberg alley, if you're mitigating, you might slow the ship down. You might post multiple lookouts to say, hey, do you see it? And you might ensure everyone knows the procedure for boarding and launching the lifeboats just in the case that we accidentally bump into one, right? So that's mitigate. Now, the fourth strategy is called transfer. Now, transfer is shifting ownership of a risk to a third party to mitigate, which is lessen, the risk or the impact if it does occur. Now, the key word is shift ownership. The picture I had has it looks like insurance type stuff, car, house, home, all those things. Insurance is a great metaphor for transfer. We are insuring the risk of replacing our car by buying insurance, those kind of things. Now, in the iceberg example, transfer is possible. Now, navigating icebergs, you could say, is too big of a risk for us to handle alone. Let's contract an icebreaker ship. Put them out leading the way. We'll follow through them. Or a pilot, like a harbor pilot that comes on and drives the ship because they know the area, they know the icebergs, they can do it. And honestly, the company could buy more marine insurance in the event that we hit one to pay for a new ship or delays or whatever the insurance would be there. But technically that would be transferring the risk. All those things are possible. Now the fifth is called escalate. And escalate is when a risk is outside the scope of a project or exceeds the project manager's authority. Individuals at a higher level are informed and leveraged to provide appropriate assistance. So we're going to the big boss. Now, in the iceberg example, when a helmsman on watch has an issue, they could call the captain. The captain could call the Coast Guard, go into a higher and higher level. So, as we're laying down those 5 strategies, if you were the captain, which response would you choose? Well, let me help you. Now, there's a way to know if your risk response strategy is really, really good. And great risk response strategies are, number 1, they're appropriate for the scenario. Number 2, they're cost effective. And number 3, they're realistic. So if we look at appropriate, cost effective, and realistic in the iceberg example, is there one that we can automatically wipe away? I think we can wipe away. Number 1 is just accept it. We have all seen Titanic. I have actually never seen Titanic, but I know how it ends. It is not acceptable to just say, roll them dice. So that's not an appropriate strategy. Now we're wiping that one out. Now, if we look at the rest of them, appropriate, cost-effective, and realistic, I think those all have their own merits. Avoiding, mitigating, transferring, escalating. Now, the reality is we don't just have to choose one. We can choose multiple strategies, a primary, a backup, anything that works for us because we're trying to prepare relevant strategies for our risk, for our project, for building project resilience, right? Now, let's go back and double down and check our register. As we went through here, we know that we had the risk of an increase in cost would be bad for our baseline. We know it's the hottest thing on our list. So we had a trigger condition. That's what we would know that hey, things get bad when this happens. When the price of steel got above $1,200 per metric ton, that would be bad. Now, our risk response plans, we in the planning process would go through a bunch of different objects. Well, maybe we could transfer it. Maybe we can accept it. Maybe we can avoid it. Who knows? The solution that was picked, and I want you to tell me which strategy it was to establish an agreement to pre-purchase steel at a defined rate as you're in planning. Which strategy would that be? It would be avoiding the risk of it going way higher because we are going out and saying hey, we're going to cut a deal at this price so that we don't have any risk of the price going to the moon because we already bought the stuff. Simple as that. Now, we would establish a risk owner to handle that deal, all right? And we would say, what is the status and what are the results? So the status is Sam went off. He already completed this. and we establish an agreement with a vendor, and the baseline, the cost baseline, remember we were in planning, was updated to reflect the expense. So that, boom, summarizes the entire line. We can go to the next one. Awesome. Now, risk responses, they're awesome. But just like we showed, they ain't free, okay? The risk responses there, the ones that we define what we need to do about them, we have to define contingency reserve for those risk responses. We need to have money to pay for them. Now, a way to say about contingency reserve is money incorporated into the baseline to pay for risk responses for known, unknown risks, meaning we know about the risks, we don't know if it's going to happen. So known, unknown. So the money tagged to those risk responses is called contingency reserve. Beautiful. Now, establishing risk response, you know what it does? It builds project resilience. And as we go through here, step number 2 is how do we get ready to execute those strategies? No, the risk owner must be prepared to act. Like this lady with the arrow, I'm ready to shoot. Those are the risk responses. So when we look there, the trigger condition is when that person says, boom, it is time to shoot this risk response. And the risk response has already been established so that everybody is prepared. Think about the big, long list of risks. We'd have trigger conditions and response plans for all the ones that matter. Makes sense. So to summarize, we've nailed step 1, find, prioritize, and strategize. We're going to continue to do that through the length of the project. And we've got ready to execute those strategies at the right time. And now, once we get those done and we actually shoot the arrows, bang, we got to see, did they hit the target? Did they serve the risk response? Did they actually achieve their success? Now, our mantra is always, like I said, plan versus actual. We expect it to work, but we got to check. What did the actual turn out to be? If it's off the mark, we adjust the strategy. That's the way it goes. Okay? And as we get deeper and deeper and deeper into the project, we're going to uncover new risks and opportunities. We got to go back, update them in the risk register, and keep on rolling. Now, to finish this out, the constant drumbeat is we got to have risk meetings, monthly, if you will, and risk reports that summarize the relevant risk information. What new risks have we identified? What's the status of our contingency reserve? How much money have we spent? How much we got left? How effective have our risk response been in serving the need? And what assistance do we need? That'll keep everybody aware, everybody updated, and everybody moving in the right direction. Now, we got to remain vigilant. Just like this guy looking out the window, we can never stop looking for risk. We can never stop updating our risk, and we can never stop looking at the effectiveness of our risk response plans. Now, we have nailed risk down. Our next step is to talk all about procurement. So I'll see you in that video.